Welcome to Regeneration, a podcast about reimagining Jewish practices in a modern world. I'm Debs Weinberg.
And I'm Eileen Levinson, and we're here to help families, friends, and chosen families revive customs with authenticity, creativity, and joy.
From Shabbat candles to everyday blessings, discover how you can weave new and old practices together across the generations to bring the people you love closer.
So, Debs, one of the many things that we've connected on is our interest in using our body, whether it's through yoga, meditation. I have a long history of being a dancer. I think you said that you were a cheerleader in high school. I also had a brief but awkward run as a cheerleader. And dance has always been something that's just been in me. I remember taking little creative movement as a preschooler and ballet and tap. And I loved my recitals, and I still remember some of the moves. And a little family ritual that unexpected. I don't know if you remember I think it was 1990-ish, there was a show called In Living Color. And it was Damon Wayans and the Wayans brothers. And it was this great little comedy sketch show. It's where Jim Carrey got his start. They had the Fly Girls dancing in the beginning, and in the middle of it, J-Lo was a Fly Girl before she was J-Lo. I was 9, 10 years old, and if I was watching it with my brothers, I would always get up and dance with the Fly Girls. Like, I wanted to be a Fly Girl. I was a dorky little white suburban girl, but I wanted to shake it like a Fly Girl. So for me, growing up dancing, I wasn't in it to perform. I didn't want people to tell me, oh, you're a great dancer. I just loved the feeling of moving and being in space with people and connecting and being silly and figuring out all the different ways that we can move together and take our feelings and turn it into movements. And I might not have had powerful ritual experiences growing up in the way that I can name at the time, but dancing to me was always the most sacred, the most holy time. And even watching and dancing with the Fly Girls on In Living Color as a kid and laughing with my brothers, that was ritual in my home. And so when I think about Jewish ritual, I keep coming back to dance and theater. The intersection between theater and ritual is powerful. The ancient Greeks understood theater as catharsis, a shared transformation that moves from everyone in the room at once. It's not something the performers do to the audience, but something that happens between them. And the boundary dissolves, and everyone is present, participating in creating magic together. And Jewish ritual works in the same way. It's an interactive performance. You set the stage for everyone present. You create a space that is separate from the mundane nature of everyday life. It's elevated from our ordinary time. And in these magical moments, we're reaching across generations. We're lending an outstretched hand to people who may not be in the room, but are very much present in our hearts and our memories and the stories that we call in. Ultimately, we rely on these experiences to help us process our rapidly changing lives. And our guest today, Rabbi Dr. Vanessa Ochs, has a rich background in both Jewish ritual and theater, which is why this conversation is so exciting. Vanessa is a professor emerita in the Department of Religious Studies at University of Virginia. She's an ordained rabbi. She's author of The Passover Haggadah, a biography, and Inventing Jewish Ritual, a book that I keep on my bookshelf within arm's reach. I love to reach for it, both for the ideas that she's sharing and for a little bit of her delightful voice, which you'll hear today. Welcome to Regeneration, Vanessa.
Thank you so much. Regeneration, I like the term.
Vanessa, before we dive in, you have a background in theater. from Sarah Lawrence. And then you made a shift and chose to become an anthropologist of religion. What led you in this direction?
Well, I thought I was going to go into theater, but I wasn't just doing theater writing. I found myself exploring all kinds of writing, fiction, nonfiction, memoir. And so my first career really was as a journalist. And my first book was on Jewish women. The late Professor Judah Golden told me that he read my first book and he said, "You know, you're an anthropologist." It's like, oh, well, at the time I was teaching writing and women in Judaism at Drew. And I thought, what would happen if one day my department chair were to actually read my resume and see I had never taken a course in religion or Jewish studies or anything like that. So I thought, so for a variety of reasons, I thought I should get a PhD in anthropology of religion. And it was a great idea because I went from there to being a professor of Jewish studies at University of Virginia. And that was where my academic career took place.
I am curious, having come from a background in theater, it seems like you came to the study of religion through women's stories, and as you're saying, through as a journalist. I'm wondering, for you as with your background as a theater practitioner, what connections do you see between theater or interactive theater and our Jewish ritual practices?
First of all, new rituals are improvised, but then the old ones are improvised as well. You're planning to have a Passover Seder, but the Seder leader is sick. Who's going to take over? Or there are six more guests. What do? You can't find the Haggadah. What do? The food is burnt. What are you going to do? All kinds of things happen. So first of all, you need to improvise. Second of all, I would say that rituals that take place in groups are always contingent upon the feel of the group. In the same way that, when you're doing a show, a play or dance, it's like, it was a good night. It wasn't a good night. That people, there's a sense of being up. Ritual is a performance. There's also the element of how prepared you are. Are the props all there? Are they good props? Did you shower? Did you shower and get dressed up for Shabbat? Because if you did, you're ready in a different way for anything you do on Shabbat than if you just sort of raced home and caught your breath. Ritual involves some of the kind of intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about when a play begins, there's a hush, the lights go off, and then they come on. You think about Shabbat is the same way. You turn on the lights, there's this quiet, the blessing is said, there's a burst in Good Shabbos, and then Shabbat begins. There's a sense of moments,
Mm-hmm.
carving moments through things you say and do.
One of the goals of this podcast is to remind people that ritual doesn't need to be rote. It doesn't need to be obligatory. So tell us more about kind of the elements of meaningful ritual and what makes a ritual Jewish.
As a rabbi, I love to marry people, perform weddings. And I saw one of my grooms who worked in one of the Smithsonian institutions. And I said to him, "What Jewish stuff do you do?" And he said, "Well, we did Hanukkah." They have a little boy. I said, "No, you got to upgrade this. You're going to do Shabbat. But this is how you're going to do Shabbat. Every week, you're going to have wine and grape juice. You're going to have bread and candles. And wherever you are, you're going to say, 'Thank you, God, for the lights. And thank you, God, for the bread. And thank you, God, for the wine.' And then you're going to look at each other and say, 'Thank you, God, for each other. I'm so grateful.'" I said, "That's Shabbat. That's all you have to do. You have had Shabbat as a Jew." We think of certain Jewish rituals as being incredibly complicated. And try and make a house kosher. Try and make a house kosher for Passover. Try and plan a whole, all the aspects of a funeral. it's really complicated, but it's also possible to very, very simply, with minimal props and minimal language, to create a holy moment for a family. If you do it week after week after week, that marks who you are. That marks who you are as a family. It marks how you understand time. And when people say to you, what does it mean for you to be Jewish? You don't have to think about, some verse someplace or open up a Jewish history book. You just think the bread, the wine, my family, we're together. We have these moments. Of course, we're Jewish. That's what we as Jews do.
I think that really what it's about is connection. We're connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Right? So it's connecting,
Yes.
whether that's each other, time,
Yeah.
nature, Jewish peoplehood, any of that.
Mhm. I grew up for many years in my grandparents' home. And for me, any ritual that I perform or that any of my extended, very large circle of cousins performs, we're always thinking about the grandparents' home. We're always thinking about what they did, what we did with them. And now that there are many new generations in place after their passing, we often think when we look around at our own ritual practices with our children, there's this element, and some of us in my family even have, I don't, but some have great grandchildren. There's a sense of what nachas, what pleasure the grandparents would have taken to know that we are still doing these practices that we learned in their home. And there isn't a moment when I light candles when I'm not picturing my grandmother doing it as well. My mother died 2 years ago, but my mother would light the candles, then I would, then my daughters would, then the grandchildren would. And there is this sort of this succession of generations. And so they may not have seen my grandmother light, but I could picture that.
I love the way that you're describing how ritual connected you to different generations. Can you tell us more about your own upbringing and how your grandparents influenced that experience?
So when my mother divorced, I was a little girl. She and I moved back into her parents' home. She had three younger siblings, and I, in effect, became the even younger sibling. So my mother was off being an artist, and so my grandparents were taking care of me, as were my uncles and my aunt. That was their Jewish world was my whole world. This smells of getting ready for Shabbat or Shabbat, my grandmother's Shabbat cooking. I thought everybody in the world was Jewish. I was shocked because I was just in their house and we would go to shul and in a little tiny little Orthodox shul. I was shocked to learn that the neighbor wasn't. We had a neighbor who wasn't Jewish, and so it was a world that was like totally perfused with elements of Jewish time. There was when Shabbat started, it started. When Shabbat was over with Havdalah, it was we entered a different time. And my grandfather sat he had a liquor store, and he was doing his. I think he counted. He did his finances at the table, and I saw this huge difference between holy time and everyday time. Then when my mother remarried, we continued to go to my grandparents' home for Shabbat and for holidays, and even if we had to drive there. So there was a sense of there wasn't a sense of optional. Like this was our world.
So I want to ask you about having a Jewish home. When my daughter got married to someone who was Catholic and they said they're going to raise the kids Jewish, I said, that's wonderful. And I also hope you have a Jewish home. And she said, well, what does that mean? So you started to talk about how you lived in a very Jewish home, that it was different than, your neighbors, the smells. What else would you say when people ask you about a Jewish home? What makes a home Jewish?
First of all, Jewish times are marked. The Sabbath, the holidays, the birth of a baby, the death, the life cycle events are marked in Jewish kinds of ways. there was this easy back and forth between home and synagogue. So when I lived with my grandparents, everyone from synagogue came to our house after shul for little glasses of schnapps or wine and pastry. So there's this easy sense of back and forth that Jewish life was not only in the synagogue. It came wherever the people went was where Judaism was. So I think I learned that early on. In those days, Jewish homes weren't filled with all kinds of tchotchkes the way they are right now, all kinds of Jewish objects and Jewish art. But if you looked around, you'd see that the Shabbat candles were probably always out. There were yarmulkes all over for the men to pop on their heads. You'd see the tefillin bags, they would be there. You'd look in the pantry and you'd see not only lots of kosher foods and kosher meats, but you'd just see lots of food. And you'd see many sets of dishes for everyday meat and milk, Passover meat and milk. You'd see announcements all over for synagogue activities or for announcements for when you're supposed to mark the memory of someone's death. In my mother's house, if you opened up the cabinet where the cups were kept, my mother was always breaking cups and glasses. But the only elements in our cabinet that had full sets were our orange juice cups, which were all used yahrzeit candles, candles used to mark the death of loved ones. And since you marked that several times a year, we had a lot of them. So there would be Jewish objects. And then if you got new clothes, you were getting new clothes for Passover or new clothes for Rosh Hashanah. So your clothes, too, while they didn't look Jewish in any particular way, they're new. The fact that they were new and that they came around the time of a holiday, that made those clothes Jewish. I would say that in my own home, nature became Jewish as well. When my grandchildren, they're now 17-year-old twins, but when they were little and they would drive down from New Jersey to Charlottesville for Passover, the first thing they would do before they even came inside is I would encourage them to race down into the backyard with me with little plastic bags or little plastic containers to pick the first violets of the year. And those violets would be part of our Seder plate decorations. So in a sense, our backyard was part of the holiday, or picking flowers for the holiday was what it meant to mark Passover at Grandma and Grandpa's.
Your work has really helped expand to fully include women and Jewish rituals for women. And I think about some of the rituals that now kind of over time I take for granted, like birth ceremonies for Jewish girls or Rosh Chodesh groups and women's seders. Can you tell us more about those rituals? What were some of the barriers to creating them, if any, and what's next?
The 70s and 80s were a very important time when Jewish women who were both having access to sacred texts and challenging the institutions that kept them from learning deeply and properly. When these women like Judith Plasko, like Esther Broner, and joined by some public women like Letty Pogreben, one of the editors at Ms., when women were gathering together and they were asking themselves, why are we excluded? Why are we excluded from the minyan? Why are we excluded from the quorum of 10? Why are we excluded from certain very key practices like wearing a talit, wearing a prishel, wearing a kippah, being able to read from the Torah? And is there some reason? And with enough study, the reason was that they were excluded. It's not and that was the reason that they were excluded, and that if women had enough learning, they could have access. But the problem of exclusion was not handled just by add women and stir, as we say. Okay, honey, put on a kippah. There were other systemic problems. For instance, that the language was all male. God was the king in the sky, and when we remembered our ancestors, we only remembered our male ancestors. So the idea of transforming liturgy, degendered liturgy, in order to allow women and girls to feel totally included. It required a great deal of work in Jewish history too, to remember who were the women whose lives and traditions were forgotten, were all marked as Jews. But events of a Jewish woman's life typically were not marked. We had, until recently, no ritual on the books for what do you do when you learn you're pregnant? What do you do for a miscarriage? Is there no special ritual to perform for packing your bag to go to the hospital? No special ritual for holding your baby in your first hand? I mean, yes, there are, we would say the shachiano, this first time. Could there be special rituals? A ritual for your first period, a ritual for becoming a grandmother? There's a wonderful book called, I believe it's called Moments That Matter by Laura Geller and a colleague of hers. And there, it's all about the rituals of, I mean, this is very relevant to grandparents. It's all of the rituals, moments of life for when you are beyond midlife, leaving your house, sending your kid to college, marking the end of a marriage, packing up a house, decluttering your house, moving to a new place. And then ones for later on in life, when you start to need a hearing aid or a cane, or you're moving, or you have issues with memory. How do you mark when one ritual is when a woman is a widow and she takes off her wedding rings? And as a sign of a different kind of readiness, perhaps to pursue relationships. All the transitions.
Yeah, these are moments that have deep meaning and gravity in our lives. And I think sometimes they might be marked with tears or a deep breath. And there have been I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about people in all these situations that have probably wanted some Jewish wisdom to carry them through that moment.
And I would say there's been a real advantage for men as well, because when a woman is infertile and a couple is deciding that they're going to move towards adoption, well, the man in her life is very much implicated as well. Or if a couple is moving from one house to an independent living, both members of the couple are implicated and might wish to mark those events as Jews. And but previously, there wasn't that kind of creative experimentation possible, and it was feminism opened that door to creative exploration.
I have to send this to you. I was going back into your book a couple weeks ago when I was staying with my in-laws. They were here to celebrate my son's first birthday.
Oh, Mazel Tov. Mazel
Thank
Tov.
you. It was really wonderful having our whole family together. And so my father-in-law, who's very involved in his Reform congregation, and, he's a big supporter of recustom, but maybe not so much of a, when we talk about ritual innovation, it's things that are newer to him. But I was telling him about your book. And then one day he goes, well, how about this for ritual innovation? He goes over to my son and we talk about him getting kepi kisses from his grandparents. He goes, tekiah, and smooch, and does the sounds of the shofar in syncopated kisses on my son's head, which was really adorable. And I was thinking, oh gosh, I got to send this to Debs and Vanessa in advance of the podcast.
I would say that is a very important ritual. And I hope that your son and his grandpa will do that so long that one day, that when your son, God willing, is a grandpa too, that he will know that that's incumbent upon him to perform that ritual with his grandlings.
I hope so. And it really speaks to how ritual can be created just by time and place and playfulness. I think we don't talk enough about playfulness in Judaism.
Well, Vanessa, I was wondering if there was a small, simple ritual that you might suggest for listeners who want to try inventing something this week.
Make a list on one side of the paper of all the things you don't want in your house. Anger, monsters, dirt, germs, icky people, all the things you don't want in your house. And then make another list, different side of the paper, of everything you want inside your house. Love, peace, friendship, yasso bars, kind bars, chocolate chip pancakes, gluten-free chocolate chip pancakes, sushi, all the things, all the good things. And then using the format of a very popular ritual object that you see in Israel and in America, using the format of a house blessing amulet. Take another piece of paper and write 4 lines. In this house, may there be no blank. In this house, may there be no blank. In this house, may there be no blank. And go back to your list of all the yucky things. And in those first 3 blanks, fill it in. May there be no monsters. May there be no germs. And in the last line is, in this house, may there be, and put 4 or 5 or 6 lines, and then take from your good list, your list of inclusion, things that you really, really, really want to have in your house, and write that down, and then read it aloud together. And you have a custom designed house blessing.
In your own life, do you have a specific Jewish ritual or practice that you find most meaningful?
Oh, Shabbat.
Tell us about how you celebrate Shabbat in your family.
Without whoever's house we're in, they're in charge of making a really special dinner, like the most special dinner of the week. And there's always wine, and sometimes there's a festive beverage. One of our children practices when the kids were younger is we always had a festive beverage for Shabbat. It was usually like a sparkling cider or a sparkling grape juice. So there's a festive beverage, and either we've picked up a great challah someplace, or in my daughter's house, they make challah, and I sometimes make challah. Yeah, we just, Shabbat dinner is like, it's the family, it's the event. It's the event. When we moved to Virginia and my younger daughter observed Shabbat with us, our other daughter was already in college. She invited her friends to come over, her friends from the track team. They showed up as well. So they were part of the fun. And it was just, of course, we did all the traditional blessings, the really good part, the very special part. When we first had children, my husband and I lived in Hamilton, New York, and he was the counselor to Jewish students at Colgate, which meant that during the school year, I had to get the children ready. He was rushing around to get his sermon ready and to make sure that the student chefs had made the chicken and whatever. I hated those Friday nights. There was just so much stress to get the children washed and out the door and showing up and looking like a nice Jewish family. It was a theater that I didn't want to be part of. But then the students went home for vacation.
Mm.
And I didn't have to rush. We didn't have to rush off. And I would get the children all showered and ready. And I get me and my husband, and we would get showered and ready. And we all put on our pajamas. And we came to Shabbat dinner in our pajamas.
Mm.
And to this day, when my husband are when we are by ourselves in our house and we don't have company, we shower and get ready for Shabbat, and we put on our very nicest pajamas, our very, very nice pajamas. And we have Shabbat in pajamas. And it reminds us of some of the spirit of the day, that it's not being in public, it's not being on show, it's not being an example to other people. It's just us relaxed together.
We've talked about so many amazing practices and the ways that Jewish ritual has adapted over time, how you personally have adapted Jewish ritual in meaningful ways. Is there anything that a Jewish ritual or practice that you've still been waiting to refresh, or you've been hearing or seeing that you feel most needs a refresh?
The ritual of Passover preparation is one I think we just go so overboard with anxiety that it's probably worth reminding ourselves what rabbis all say, that chametz isn't dust, that yes, it is exciting to do spring cleaning, and yes, we do need to spring clean our houses, but there's a kind of anxiety and hysteria that leads us far away from the spirituality of the day. But I'd say even more so, the rituals that I think really needs the complete altogether refreshment is the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, the b mitzvah, the demands of what a child needs to know and perform is simply over the top for a 12 or 13-year-old. And many rabbis will say that they themselves do not want the children to have to learn all of this stuff and would be fine with the kid just having, going up and having an aliyah. That would be just fine. But the parents want their children to perform the Torah reading, the Haftorah reading, reading from this, giving a sermon, giving doing all this stuff because the Goldberg girl did that, or the Goldberg boys, the Goldberg twins did that. And I wish that more and more rabbis would be strong, say, something, back, in the immigrant generation, certainly when my father was a boy, a bar mitzvah meant your dad took you to shul, to synagogue that morning of your birthday. You put on tefillin the first time. You had an aliyah. They gave you a cup of schnapps and you went back to school. And that was that. And that sounds like a really good idea. I mean, I like the idea of celebrating. That's nice and all. But I would say that what really, really demands rethinking is the kind of skills that a child is supposed to demonstrate on that day. Maybe it would be one thing if the kid was going to keep on using them. But really, in conservative and reform synagogues, how often do you see kids getting up and continuing to lead services or read from Torah or read Haftorah? It just doesn't happen. And so why? Why, when there's so many other things that a kid might learn more valuably?
This is where I think the essence, the reason behind the ritual, is getting mixed up with all of the layers of formality that we're putting on top of it, when really we just want our young people to have a love of Judaism and to feel like they're a part of community and to feel that they are responsible for our stories and carrying our stories forward, and that we entrust them to now engage with Torah and community and conversations about God, whatever we feel God is or isn't, together with the adults. It's so wonderful speaking with you, Vanessa, as always. Is there anything else that you were thinking about in the conversation that you wanted to add?
Yes, there was. There was. In this book called Moments That Matter, there was this ritual about becoming a grandparent. And my sister, so I've been in the grandma business for 17 years now, but my sister just became a grandma. And I noticed that one of the rituals in this book was a ritual to perform when you become a grandparent. And possibly a ritual would be for all the people who came in, who became grandparents. And they all come up to the Torah and they get they say something or they get a blessing. And I was just thinking, like, that would be a really nasty ritual to perform in a community setting, because I can only imagine all the people who are dying to become grandparents but haven't yet, or maybe never, will look at their joyous friends and neighbors and would feel happy for them, but they would feel so profoundly excluded. Because I know that being a grandparent, I know what the extraordinary joy of being, what that is when you're blessed with connection to your children and to your grandchildren. And I know not everyone has that. In those cases, maybe a private shehechianu is really all thank you, God, that I came to this moment. Maybe that's all you need, because every time that you're with that grandchild and touching that grandchild and holding them, the joy is so profound, and the sense of blessedness, the sense of gratitude, that might be a situation where it's best to experience it privately or with your most intimate families. Sometimes rituals that make you feel excluded probably aren't the best ones to do in public.
Very, very wise. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've learned so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So many rituals I'm now going to take back to my family and We're so appreciative.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to be part of this beautiful conversation, a beautiful and holy conversation.
Thanks for listening to our interview with Vanessa Ochs. We'll link to her work in the show notes. I'm still thinking about how sometimes rituals can be done so simply, with actually minimal props, minimal language, to create what Vanessa calls a holy moment for the family. And if you do it repeatedly, it starts to become who you are. And rituals connect to time, to nature, Jewish peoplehood, and family. This first season of Regeneration is a 10-episode journey. We invite you to join us every Friday to explore new ideas for Jewish ritual, hear from an inspiring guest, and receive tips to practice on your own. You can visit us at recustom.com/regeneration to download all of your guidebooks, see the episode list, and sign up for our newsletter so you stay up to date on everything happening with Regeneration.
Regeneration is a partnership between Recustom and the Jewish Grandparents Network,
and is hosted by Eileen Levinson and Deborah Weinberg, and produced by Josh Gilbert and Kate Mishkin.
Follow the Regeneration podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week. See you then.